This is Into the Storm, Triumphant Tragedy Transformation. Buffaloes, not cowards. Buffaloes wisely fight into the storm, not painfully away from the storm like cowards or cows. This is raw, real, and rewarding for men with spiritual values. I'm Ryan Smith, your host, and it is my privilege to be with Bunker Weimer, your co-host. This is your podcast. By joining us, you join the community of post-secularism, vanguards combining the one, Eastern religious and spiritual values with Western secular and scientific understanding. It's time to stop operating as if one is better than the other, but we're really just talking about the same thing and operating with one objective, truth. Today's episode is beat them at their own game and put them in their place, leveraging relationship by turning the other cheek. We want to meet with you and help you with your relationship. So book a call and speak with me. Ryan or Bunker, go from sad and stuck to love and passion in your relationship. Enough is enough. Today, what do you do when you're with a friend who's depressed, or a spouse, when they reject you, when there's high stress, and the conversation is crucial to the relationship, and this will either make or break you? Do you know what to do in those situations? How do you have composure in the seeming failure, the trap, and the relationship landmines? Today, I am so excited to talk about this. And recently, Bunker and I got together, and Bunker shared his, what I call practical psychology of how to deal with crazy, what to do in that situation, and actually not just like endure it, but make the most of it, make it into a game, make it so that we can transform a seemingly bad situation or a stressful situation into an opportunity. And so this is what we're all about. And it's so excited to peel back the layer and the veil and see behind the curtain and the secrets to what makes, alpha leaders. And so I'm so excited for this. And before we maybe go into your 9 steps of how to go into this and hear the jokes that you give and all of that, we break it down. If I could just ask Bunker, what helped you get to this point? What about maybe your life experience helped you to know how to interact with people? And could you maybe also share some examples of times what and how that's been effective to you? So 2-part question: what's the backstory, and maybe what's something that maybe happened recently that when you went from the sad and stuck to love and passion, or more just making a joke out of maybe a seemingly stressful, sticky situation?
Right. That's a great question. I think at a young age, just observing my parents a lot, I think that was a big part of it. I guess to preface like me answering that, I think I've always had a belief that like you kind of have the best of both worlds. I think sometimes we live in a polarized world with ourselves where we say I can either have one thing or the other. And we feel as human beings like we're really stuck. It's like our only option is to respond in a really emotional way because we're hurt. And as I watched my parents, they'd have the same discussions over and over and over again, probably to the day, like they're probably still having the same conversations. And to me, I guess there was other things I wanted to be doing, especially when you're a little kid and you're motivated. You wanted to go play, you wanted to have fun, you want to do all these other things, but yeah, we have to have the same conversation again and again and again. And so I was a silent observer and a silent listener to a lot of these. And over time, things became more and more clear. And when you have a lot of your parents, like you can't like intervene or play mediator. But I definitely took away with, hey, like my dad responded in certain ways, or he talked to somebody this way, and now he's, in my opinion, like damaged the relationship, but he got what he wanted. So I guess that's what I'm referring to when I'm saying you can have the best of both worlds. It's like you can keep a positive relationship and get what you wanted. And so those things just stuck out to me, and they were learning lessons of how to navigate life a little bit better, how to navigate people. And I think it also, which I'm appreciative, my parents were so open and vulnerable, like there was no sweeping things under the rug. There was no hiding. They were very much themselves unapologetically. And so I got to really see like what makes people tick. Like there wasn't a lot of passive aggressiveness or things behind the scenes. It was all out in the open. And so I just took those principles the best I could and realized that everybody was that way and tried to apply them. I don't know if that like answers your question well enough or like gives you an idea, but I think just observing my parents was the number one
So I think
that I could answer with.
there's a lot of loyalty to your parents and a lot of love, and I want to respect that and be sensitive as well. And I think, tell me if I'm wrong, Bunker, what I'm hearing is maybe that they would argue, and there was maybe some repeated like unresolved issues that kept being addressed but never had any resolution, and they kept on like butting heads with this, and you were the little kid just like, why are we fighting about this, why are we doing this, and you were upset, and because they were fighting about this, you weren't able to play, you weren't able to go out, and so you were highly motivated to help resolve maybe the conflict between them. And as a kid you weren't able to mediate, but as you got older maybe you learned some of these things, and because of that you helped mediate those conversations between your parents, and therefore you were able to get what you wanted, which was either to go play or you know, whatever you wanted. But basically if the parents are fighting, then like every other priority is like secondary. and
Yeah.
and so maybe so is that's what I'm hearing, but to tell me
Yeah,
what's
I
the
guess
truth.
in a sense, I am trying to be somewhat sensitive in case my parents listen to this. They're like, "Why'd you throw us on the bus?" I don't think they'd have a problem with it. Like I said, I feel like they're pretty open. But I think,
Everybody fights, so let's
I
right?
think if I could like really like
We all
sum
have
up,
arguments, we all have
right? I
we
feel like,
all no one sees eye to eye, everybody's different, they come from different worlds, but some are better at resolving and fixing that, and maybe, you know, they didn't have the skills at that time to figure it out.
yeah, and I think that was like a big part of it. Like I think there was just from their own experiences, their own difficulties growing up, there was, I guess you could call it emotional immaturity. And where in some things were just very obvious to me, it wasn't obvious to them. And that was something they struggled with. And so I think it created a lot of at least emotional independence for me, where I kind of figured out if there was something that I wanted, like I just had to find a way to do it. And sometimes it wasn't a straight path. I couldn't go straight there. Sometimes it was like keeping people happy along the way and giving them like, I guess you could say, telling them what they want to hear. I know, like if dad was upset, right? And he's like really up in arms about something, and he just wants some validation. And in my mind, it's like, hey, I think this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard that someone's mad about. But to you, it's important. So I'll tell you that I agree with you, even though in my world, this wouldn't even be happening. But I'll tell you that I agree with you so I can just move on, if that makes sense. And those definitely have pros and cons, because I think you start to learn. I wouldn't say I ever like manipulated people a lot, but I felt like I got pretty good at knowing what people wanted and giving it to them. And so like if it made them feel good, like compliments make people feel good, you know? And so sometimes you need to butter somebody up to get something that you need, like school. Like I did that a lot with my teachers, even in college. Like it was just kind of second nature for me to try to sweet talk them a little bit and play off of the things that are important to them. And, you know, if they're like female teachers were easier for me because in my opinion, like females are more emotional and they respond better to like verbal affirmations. And so if you went in and you said, hey, like you're like my favorite teacher, like I like appreciate your class so much. This is what you've taught me. This is what it's learned. This is how my life's improved because of you. And this is what I'm going through. And I could really use a little bit of help with this. Like in that way, and you've set up the framework, it was like kind of a no-brainer where they're like, oh my gosh, because you create emotional connection with them. And in my mind, I feel like it was genuine always. Like I tried to keep it like very honest. Like I did like him. Were they my favorite teacher? Like, did I happen to tell that to everybody? Probably, you know, but like I really enjoyed them. And I don't know. I feel like because of those things, we kind of built like a better relationship, but I don't know. I don't know if that's like
Yeah, you were leveraging the relationship. You were getting, and that's what when I say leveraging the relationship, it's like putting your weight around and getting what you want in a relationship. And I think these are important skills to be the alpha, to be in charge. Like you got to get what you want. And I know I think even in the scriptures, it says in Alma, you know, he was caught with guile. And I think about that a lot. And I think that sometimes there are times when but you know, we have to be very, if you're going to learn these skills and get the keys, you got to use it wisely. You know, what's the Spider-Man with great power comes great responsibility. So you listeners, we're giving you the power, but you got to use this well. Because and another way of saying the same thing is my mentor, Ben Irwin. I'm going to throw him out there. I'm sure he would appreciate this, or hopefully he does. This doesn't come back to me, but I love Ben, and he told me, he's like, as a therapist, you are no other than a socially acceptable manipulator, and you are trying to help people change. You're manipulating, you're changing them in a socially acceptable way, and another way of manipulation, like that's always a negative connotation, but I feel like it kind of gives a more vivid image, maybe, of what's happening. And like there's like an actual agenda that you have, and you're moving your chess pieces in a certain way to get a certain outcome. So that's why I like the word manipulation, but maybe not for the negative. But another way of saying the same thing is you're being persuasive.
Right. I think that's a great way to sum it up. Power of persuasion.
Power of persuasion, but that one to me seems more elusive and not like just some people are persuasive and some people aren't. But I like the idea of manipulation. Like it seems like there's a pathway, there's steps to it. And to me, it makes like there's like a pathway. And that's what I want to give you is today is like, how can you be a manipulator or like persuasive and get what you want? And especially in the situation when your spouse, someone that you care about, maybe even your children, they're in a bad, horrible state, but yet can your interaction change their focus, change their attitude, and change the energy? And to me, this is like magic, baby. This is like a magician. And I just get so excited about this. So anything else, Bunker, you wanted to say, or that I think that set up the past. Could you maybe answer the second part of my question, which is anything that happened recently that maybe could illustrate this point of this persuasive power that you maybe learned at a young age? And you kind of actually did answer that with in school, but any other stories you could share?
I think I actually use it quite a bit. It's like one of those things that you maybe aren't aware of when you're younger. Like that's how you're living your life. And then as you start to interact with people, there's differences. Like we're all different. I think ultimately trying to persuade or manipulate someone, if you will, it's best to have like a win-win in mind. Like, hey, let's benefit them and me. And so I think sometimes around like my friends currently, or just anybody that I interact with, people are emotional. There's a lot of emotions that are just, they flow heavy sometimes, and they can really bother me when I'm trying to get something done. And someone's like, well, I want to sit down and cry about my problem. And I'm like, let's cry later. I need you to do this for me real quick. Right. And so there was ways that I feel like I would try and incorporate different aspects where it's like, hey, we're going to manage your emotions for you right now, so you feel validated enough to get done what I need. And then I can do it because what I need is time sensitive, for example. And then we can talk later. And then while we're talking later, I'm going to set up boundaries to prevent this from happening again, and be kind enough, but direct enough to let them maybe have some self-awareness of saying, hey, I really needed this, and you showed up and made it all about you. And sometimes I use my humor to do that, right? And so we'll be talking and they'll just say, well, this is how I feel. And then I get my mind in reality, I'm like, who cares how you feel? This has nothing to do with you at all. But I'll just say a joke, right? Like they'll be like, oh, well, like, what about this? And I'm like, well, it's not all about you all the time, And they'll kind of laugh and they'll go, oh, like, I guess you're right. And it's like, yeah, just give me 10 minutes and then I'm all yours. Like whatever you need, I am here to talk to you about. And in my mind, that's a win-win because I'm getting what I need done. It's time sensitive, and they're on board. They're willingly cooperating with me because they know that they'll be able to express themselves and feel heard later. And then at the end, I'll say, hey, listen, like, you don't need to talk to me to feel heard. Like, you're a very smart, capable person. Like, you like overemphasize the compliments, and they start to like roll their eyes, and they're like, oh, I guess I am. But everybody likes to feel good about themselves. Like, they like to hear good things. And so you're just like, hey, like, I know that you have complete capability to manage your own emotions, because I know that there's 5-year-olds out there that can, and I totally believe in you too. And they kind of like laugh. And so you're kind of like giving like a backhanded compliment, right? Like over and over again. But if you say it in like a chipper way with like good body language, people always respond really well to it. And it kind of is like that little sheepish, like, yeah, I know, like it's something I need to work on. Like I'll try to be better. And so that's, I guess, to answer your second part of the question, like how I do it now, is it usually that, because to me, that's the quickest way. It's the quickest way to get from A to Z, I guess, or A to B, whatever it is that I need done. And because, and like you being a therapist, I'm sure you know, like people, if you didn't cut them out after a lot of time, they'd probably talk to you all day because the problems never end.
Well, I give them homework and they're they're very motivated, but also when I meet with them, I was notoriously bad about going over time, my 50-minute block of time. I felt like it took about 30 minutes to kind of really get to the good stuff. And then anyway, so I meet with my couples like 2 hours, sometimes 3. So, and we cover a lot of ground in that time. And I think because we have that concentrated time, we cover way more than we would if we like were to break it up into like 50-minute sections. We're just able to really get to the heart and really the core of what we're talking about. So I really try to have that leverage in my own practice, but I digress. So let me just summarize what I'm hearing you say, Bunker, just for our listeners and for me, because I want to use this. So the situation is you're with your partner and for whatever reason, they're emotional and they're wanting validation. And but there's like some task to get done. And if you talk about the emotions, you're not going to get this thing done that you need, and it's time sensitive. And so you take ownership and you're like, okay, I don't want to talk about their emotions. So that's like the first like decision. You make a decision where they're going and where they want to go. I don't want to go. So what do I need to do? And say, so you make an agreement with them and you negotiate and you say, listen, I would be glad to talk about your emotions and what's going on for you. But right now we need to get this thing done. But in 10 minutes or whenever we're done, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
How am I doing so far?
Great. And I think just to add, and here's a little analogy, and this is what I tell people all the time, because there's a big movement. I don't know if it's part of like the woke movement where it's like, hey, like whatever I'm feeling, I have to live out right now. Like I have to express it. And I think it's really important to express your emotions and live them out and those things. But there's a time and a place. And I think sometimes, especially for men, like people listening, you don't have the opportunity just to kind of like roll over and die for a while. And so it's like, hey, like if you have to go to the bathroom really bad, do you just go where you're sitting? It's like, no, you wait till you're in the bathroom, right? Like I think our emotions are the same way. Like we can sometimes feel things, and sometimes you're like, hey, I need to wait a minute before I dive into this. And like I have a good cousin I'm really close with. He works in the ER, and he says I have to do that every day. He goes, people come in and it's horrifying, like the things that are going on, the deformities that people come in with, the injuries. And he's like, I have to process those, or I'm going to get burnt out. But in that moment, it's go time. I have to address what's going on right in front of me to save this person's life. And so I think that's just like a good way to think about it. Of you as an individual, when people come to you and you think of your world as an ER, you're putting out fires every day, you're managing people, working through stuff, like be sure to like manage your time well, or manage the people that come in and say, hey, like right now, this is what needs my attention. I can do this later, but I don't have to go to the bathroom where I'm standing or sitting.
Yeah. Good. And maybe I have a whole maybe thought, and maybe I need to bite my tongue on emotions here, but I like what you're talking about. They're like going to the bathroom, and I think that there's a time and place for emotions, and just because you're feeling the urge doesn't mean you always let it out right then, but you got to let it out, and you can't just always keep it in. So there's like extremes on both ends of it. Like you can't just let it out whenever you want, but I don't want you to just like be constipated. And so most of the time my clients were emotionally constipated. And so I was maybe more going on this end, but I think that other extreme is important too. So yes, so they're going somewhere, they're wanting to let out their emotions. It's not the time and place, and it's not convenient for you. So you make an agreement and you say, let's do that once we're done in 10 minutes.
We're actually emotionally potty training them.
Yes. Yes. And I say, yeah, That's so funny you said that because I use similar vernacular about emotions as well. Um, and so anyway, so later, and then once, and so then they make it, and then they're like, okay, fine, well, I can compartmentalize and hold it in. Let's get the task done. So then the task gets done, and then you initiate. You don't let them initiate. You initiate and say, okay, we were going to talk about the emotions now that we accomplished the task. And then I'm not sure if I'm totally getting it, but you're basically saying, you kind of give them a backhanded compliment and saying, even a 5-year-old can handle it. And you're so smart. You're so good. You could probably handle this on your own. And you probably don't even need me. And they're like, yeah. And then you just keep complimenting them. And maybe what you're really doing is you maybe even know what their fear is or their insecurity. And you specifically touch on their button, like, oh, you're very capable. Oh, you're very smart. You're so beautiful. And then you're just whatever, you kind of knew what where they were going anyway. And so then you just say you are all those things, and you just butter them up so good. And maybe that whatever their insecurity was that triggered all that emotion, you're pacifying that, and so that you don't necessarily need to go down the whole emotional victimhood, emotional roller coaster, and you can just give them a golden stamp and certificate and say you passed and they're good and they don't need to go on the ride.
Absolutely. And I think for listeners, like before we like dive into it too much, I think like we talk a lot about being an agent or being an object. I think sometimes like life
an agent to act. You're talking about an agent to act and an agent that is acted upon.
Yes. Right. And so sometimes like we are very much getting acted upon. Like we don't move unless we are pushed. I think the approach that I'm trying to take is being an agent to act over all of it. Like I'm not going to wait for things to come or wait for like things that I guess I know, like I have a vision of what I need to get done and how I need to get it done. And so I'm just going to go for it. I'm not going to like sit back and wait and see how everybody feels, I guess. It's like I don't have the time to have a little therapy session with each person that's involved. We just go off of it really quick. So you just move in. Hey, how are you? Looking so great today. You know, they hate themselves, but you're like, I love you to death. You know, and they're just like, oh, kind of takes them off guard. Hey, I know you're super busy, but I really appreciate everything you do. You're so good at it. Here's just like one thing that I need, but I know you really want to talk about what's going on with your family, your wife, whatever. But like, how about we do this? And then we can walk and talk. You want to come with me? Like, can we go to lunch? Or you set up a certain time, right? It's like, hey, but tomorrow I'm free. I'm all yours for an hour and a half. What does that sound like to you? They're like, oh, okay. And then it's just that quick, right? Boom, 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 boom. And they might have been really upset 30 seconds ago.
You change their focus onto something that's enjoyable. Hey, let's go hit the Burger King. Let's hit the burger joint. And then they're like, yeah, I don't need to be sad. Yeah, the burgers sound great.
And I think that's ultimately, it's kind of like magicians, right? You have a magic trick and they do a split of distraction or change of like attention. And that's when you like throw in what you need or what they need, really. That's kind of what you're doing is you're giving them what they need. And so I think that can be really beneficial. If people like really upset, right? They're really like Debbie Downers. They're really in their own head. They're really just tearing themselves up. But you're like, okay, for example, like the other day I was going on this like 6-hour drive with somebody and they were just being so negative. And I'm like, I can't sit in this car if you being negative for 6 hours. Like, I didn't say that. I just, I started off with, they said something like, I'm so bad at this, that, and the other, and I'm listening to them. And at the end, they kind of like pause and I'm like, are you done? And they're like, they kind of laugh. They go, yeah, I'm done. I'm like, well, I didn't know if you were done hating yourself or I could start hating you too, And then they like kind of laugh about it. And I'm like, well, and I'll pull out my phone and I'll look at it. And like, what are you doing? Well, I have a list that I've been compiling for the last few years since I met you. And I think this is a great time to share. And they're like, are you serious? And I'm like, no, I'm just kidding, And then I'm like, but like really though, like, I think that you're a great person. I love you to death. And these are the things that you're super good at. And I'm happy to talk about anything you want, but like, we're gonna be in the car together. And I think positivity is just better than negativity. What do you think? And everybody's gonna be like, yeah. And I say, all right, I think it'd be cool if we said something good about you, things like that. But it shifted. It was real quick. That took about 30 seconds,
So they're in their negative talk, self deprecating language. They're in. You kind of let them have a little bit of airtime, but then you just kind of pull the plug on them really quick, and you say, are you done, or can I hate on you too now, or should we, or are you done? And then like,
Yeah.
and it's
Because I think a lot of times people will do that, like fishing for a compliment, right? Maybe they don't know that they're doing that, but they want someone to tell them something good. So they say something bad, and somebody say, "No, you're not that way." And I say, just always agree with them. They're like, "Man, I look so fat in this dress." And you go, "Yeah." And they'll go, "What?" And you go, "I mean, I don't think so, but if you think so, then what does it matter what I think?" And they're like, "Yeah, that makes sense." I'm like, "I think you look like a sexy hot thing," you know? They're like, "What?" You just like make it weird. I don't know.
Well, I think
Anyway, I can go on and on.
you're giving so many gems here, and what I'm picking up is just the power of humor. If you can come in and have a different energy, which is positive, that means so much. And if you can kind of not, when they're negative and stressed, and you just like are not ruffled by that, and it's water off the duck's back to you, then they usually are like, you, and so for the listener, maybe you're not like as witty as Bunker and have like these jokes and right there on the spot. But what you can do is make a decision, like you're not, next time that someone's down, that that is not going to influence you. You are going to be the thermostat, not the thermometer. And most people are the thermometer. They, wherever their environment, if everyone else is stressed out, they get stressed out. If everyone's being critical, I know in the military, like just like how everyone talked is just like they're sticking it to the man, and how the military, that, you know, they're just, you got these clothes, well, it always goes to the cheapest bidder, and like just everyone like sees himself as the victim. And anyway, that's probably maybe a whole nother psychology of like kind of that environment. But there's environments that are not negative, and like it like wasn't okay to be like stand out and be like hopeful and optimistic about things, and that type of was not rewarded in at least in the like when we were like just talking, um kind of on the, as friends, not necessarily on in business. But anyway, I digress. What I'm trying to say is just the ability to create humor and and uh and not get sucked into that and make a decision. And I think when you're saying being an agent to act, not to be acted upon, another way that I like to say the same thing is be 100% responsible.
Yes.
And Lynn G. Robbins' talk is one of my favorite of all times. Be 100% responsible. And I highly recommend checking that out. It's a BYU forum, and it talks just even when other people are making mistakes, you be the solution even to theirs. And the cool thing about this is that if you can be 100% responsible, and even when other people are to blame, you become the leader, and you think of solutions, and whatever you practice you get good at. And if you get good at coming up with solutions, then you're automatically going to be the leader. And I think this attitude is the attitude of leaders, and they're the people that get things done, and they're the people that are promoted, and they're the people that people vote for, and they get what they want. So that's what I'm hoping for you. I have another question, unless you had something else you wanted to say.
No. Okay.
How does this relate with abuse? Is this a skill you use in an abusive situation, or is this not, or there are a whole different set of rules that you use in abuse?
I think it's just like any other tool. I think it can be used for good or bad. You know, we talk a lot about, I mean, I think the Second Amendment is kind of a hot topic in the world, or at least the United States. Like, should we ban guns or do we not? But and I don't want to make it super political, but it's like, at the end of the day, it's the person who's using the tool, who's using the weapon, on how they use it, right? Like a shovel can be used to dig a hole and to create something that's to move earth and to make something beautiful. You can use a shovel to hit somebody over the head and kill them, you know, like there's a lot of things that you can use different tools for, whether they're good or bad. And I think this is the same way. Like if you wanted to manipulate people and wanted to get good at it, I have full confidence that somebody could. But if you were just saying like, hey, I want to make my life better and help other people along the way by using this, I think you can do that too. So I think it just goes back to the intention that you set of who you feel like you are right now and who you want to be in the future, what's important. And we're both religious and spiritual people. And I think we have a great desire to uphold commandments and beliefs and to follow examples that are good. And I think these tools are invaluable in helping people do that. Because just as you quoted the scripture of Alma, I think a lot about Nephi with his brothers Laman and Lemuel. He persuaded them to do better. And I think that it kind of fits into that. So I don't know if that's an adequate answer or what you were looking for, but that's what I think.
I think it was helpful, but not really answering my question. Because I think what you're saying is like, yeah, I could use this for evil intentions and could use this to manipulate and be abusive.
All right. Yeah. What is it that you're asking then?
So I think, you got to use this wisely. But what about like, with your situation, someone's like wanting to work with you on a project, but then they're maybe more concerned about getting their emotions validated. And then you use this tool. But what about in a situation when someone's like,
being abusive towards you.
Being abusive to you and calling you names or being emotionally, verbally, or maybe physically or sexually. Like they're in a position of power and they're trying to use and abuse you. Maybe they're taking this like, does this strategy, this magician power still work in this situation, or is it a set of rules?
I think so. I'll give you two examples that happened to me like in the last year. So there was two instances, both with men that I didn't know. So one was I was driving down the road and he I probably should have been paying better attention, but he jaywalked, I guess. And like I had my windows down. I wasn't going that fast. It was like in a 25. And he walked in front of my truck, and it was kind of slow to slow down. But it didn't bother me one bit. And he started screaming at me, right? Just letting me have it, like that I was in the wrong, all this stuff. And so I was going to like kind of where he was going. So I park and I get out and he's just still yelling at me. I didn't say anything. It didn't necessarily bother me. And in my mind, I'm like, man, I could beat this guy up if I need to. Like, he's like, this out of shape guy carrying his 44-ounce drink. And I'm like, dude, what are you so mad about? And so he gets kind of close to me and I said, hey man, sorry about that. Just kind of owned it. And I think that kind of too. So he's like, hey, you should be sorry. I'm like, well, the real question is, I just want to know where you got that shirt at, because you're looking pretty good in it. Super cheesy, super lame, right? And he just looks at me and he's like, what? And it took him back. Like his whole body language shifted because he wanted to be so angry. He wanted that emotional response from me. I didn't give it to him. And I just kept walking, right? So he's kind of like on my side now. And then I just kind of looked over my shoulder and said, but the real question that I want to know is, do they make that shirt for men? Just making it look like a jab at him that he's got a feminine shirt. And I said, because man, you're yelling at me like a woman would, something like that. And he laughed about it. He said, shoot, man, you're right. And I said, but hey, like next time I see you, I'm going to stop way early. I'm going to speed up so I don't have to have this conversation. And we laughed about it, right? Like it was kind of a joke. And I was going into a store, and that was it. That was the end of it.
Say it again. What did you say? Next time I'm going to speed up so we can have this conversation.
Next time I'm going to speed up. So speed up or just stop right away so we don't have to have this conversation. Like I was implying, like I'm going to hit you with my truck so I don't have to talk about this anymore. Or I'll just like stop way earlier so I don't even upset you.
Good. So this does apply, and this you came in with different energy. This is exactly what I think is so cool, that this strategy applies not only in stressful situations, but like bad and ugly situations. And this is amazing, just how to interact with people. And this isn't the normal polite, and this takes guts. This takes some courage. This is the buffalo into the storm mentality. And what you did is you were driving your car and this guy jaywalked in front of you. You almost hit him, or at least he was scared. He was breaking the law, and you were in the right, but he got scared and he was wanting to blame you that you weren't being more aware of him, although he was just walking in the middle of the street.
Yeah.
And then so he started cussing you out, calling you names. And then you got out of your car and you kind of ignored him, and then you said, you kind of like had a little joke of like, "Hey, nice shirt, man." And he's like, "What? Like, I'm ready to fight you." And you're like, and then you kind of came at it. Well, the real question is where did you get your shirt? Because it's like a girl's shirt. And then you kind of you kind of mess him up, and then he laughs, and and then and then you like came at him again. Is like, next time I'm just going to speed up this conversation. I'm just going to plow right through you. So we don't even have to have this fight, and, or just not, or just slow way before. And then he's like, and then how did he react to that?
Oh, he just kind of laughed and he threw his hand up and he said, "Yeah." And I think he even said, "My bad." He goes, "Yeah, my bad." He seemed pretty cool, or whatever.
Good, good, good. Yeah. And that was it, right?
Yeah.
So this to me is what Jesus was talking about in turning the other cheek. So this is what I wanted to get to, but anything else you wanted to say?
No, I mean, I always have plenty of stories to share on the matter, but no,
Well, this is what the phrase turn the other cheek. What does that mean? And how does that apply when people are rude to you? Like someone's just slapped you on the cheek. And Jesus, said, give them your other cheek. And, the Mosaic law was an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. They slap you on the cheek, slap them back. Matthew 5:38-39 says, Jesus says, you have heard it was said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. So there it is. And I think it means when it says, do not resist an evil person. And I think in the King James, this isn't the King James, it's like, resist not evil. But I think what it's saying is, don't embrace evil. Even though they're evil, they have the anger, the malice, don't go to their level. And I think this is about, it's kind of in the context of it, right before it is talking about the Mosaic law, and he's giving the higher law. And I think this is really cool because in where are we? We're in Luke chapter 6, the same story, but kind of from a different perspective. This is the time when he just called his 12 apostles. This was his first introductory thing, like saying, if you are going to follow me, this is the standard you need to live. And so I want to break this down, do a little bit of exegesis on this so that we understand how to interact with people. And this is how Jesus said it. And this is what he basically was saying to them. And it was just before in Luke 6, he had them do this rebellious thing, which was eat on the Sabbath day, the cornbread, and they're walking straight through the field. And then Jesus says, look, even David ate the shewbread from the temple, which wasn't kosher for him to eat, but he did it, and that was good for him, which is the law that you, Sadducees and Pharisees, agree with. Even there was a time when there was an exception to the rule, and we're doing this. And by the way, I'm the Son of Man and the Lord of the Sabbath, and so I can do what I want. So he kind of sticks it to them there. And so I think that he was being rebuked, and that was kind of him just kind of, he kind of played them he used their own Bible, their own set of rules, and found an exception to that where it applied to them. And then he kind of one-upped it too, and he said, look, I'm the one that created the Sabbath, so I can do what I want. And where are we? So he calls his 12 disciples, and he heals a bunch of people. And then he gives the Beatitudes, right? Blessed are the poor. And I like this. Blessed are ye that weep now, for ye shall laugh. That's not a very quoted scripture, but I think it's, to me, the yin-yang of emotion. But I think...
And what's the reference on that one?
This is Luke 6:21, which we do not use that enough. I'm going to use that. Blessed are ye that weep now, for ye shall laugh. So I think, and this is with the yin yang of emotions, when you can come in with this approach, and we will get to the approach. We're going to break that down, but I just wanted to set the stage so that you really appreciate the gems when we like break it down for you. That when you do this, when people weep, when you implement this, their weeping will go to laughter. And skipping down, verse 27, but I say unto you that you which hear, love your enemies, do good to them which hate you, bless them that curse you, pray for them which despitefully use you. And that's the message that he wants. That's the standard for his disciples. And now he's going to go in and say, look, I really mean what I just told you. I really do want you to love your enemies. And give to every man that asketh of thee, and to him that taketh thy goods, ask them not again. And then he says, if you love them which love you, what think ye? For sinners also love them that love them. So even bad people are nice to their other bad friends. But if you're going to be a good person, you're going to be good to also the bad people. That sets you apart. And I think 35 is the real nail on the coffin, the real punchline. Love your enemies, do good to them, and he says, even your Father in heaven is kind to the unthankful and to the evil. So he's setting the standard. And then he goes 39. So now he stops saying do good to them. And then he goes can the blind lead the blind? Shall they not both fall into the ditch? And what he's saying, you guys that are listening, you guys have been following the Mosaic law, which is the blind law. I can see, you cannot. If you keep following your old way, you're going to fall into a ditch. But if you follow my way, I'm going to lead you to the place that rocks. And you're not going to fall into the ditch. And then verse 40, the disciple is not above his master, but everyone that is perfect shall be as his master. So I'm above you. You are the learners. But if you do what I say, then you as the learner will become the master. You will be perfected. That's what that means in verse 40. But everyone that is perfect shall be as his master. So if you follow this, you'll become perfect and you will be the master eventually, which to me is like the hero's journey, master of two worlds. And then he talks about, why beholdest the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but perceiveth not the beam that is in thy own? So don't be a hypocrite. So when you're looking at other people who are being mean to you, second guess yourself. Are they really in the wrong? And first recognize your own mistake. And I like to think that, in the movie Gandhi, there's a great line. He says why are you so kind or merciful or forgiving to other people, Gandhi? And he's like, listen, I have a hard enough time with my own thing, and I set a goal for myself and I fail at it so often. So it's so hypocritical of me when I see someone else failing to accomplish what they need. I can hardly do what I want to do. And so I put the same compassion I give to myself, I try to give that to others. And so I think that's what he's saying about an eye for an eye, or no, cast out the beam from your own eye, then you can see clearly. So he's saying, when you see other people's the rocks that are in their eyes, check out the house that's in yours. And I just, how many people are patient with me and have to put up with me? I'm not super aware of all the kindness and the patience they have to exert for me. But take a second and take yourself out of yourself, get some self-perspective or self-awareness of all the kindness that's being shown to you. And then you can maybe be kind to others, because we're still talking about be kind and loving to those that are your enemy. And then he goes on, which to me, they've always been separate thoughts, but these are all one thought, which that's why I'm wanting to say this. So verse 43, for the good tree bringeth not forth corrupt fruit, neither doth a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. So if you're a good fruit, if you really are a loving person, then when someone's unloving to you, then you're going to be loving to them. If you think you're a loving person, you're going to be loving even to the intolerable. So you think you're tolerable? When people are intolerable to you, you need to be tolerable to them. And I think so often people are mean to me, and then we say, I'm going to be mean back. But that's not what he's saying. He's like, you got to be, if you're a good fruit, then you always produce good fruit, even in the face of adversity. And a good man out of the good treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is good. So if you really are good, you're going to give good regardless of how other people are treating you. You're going to be 100% responsible. You're going to act even when people are doing less than what they need to do. So we're still talking about that same thing about loving your enemies. And then he goes in and talks about